kayo ho ba ay kuminsan po nakukonsulta ng inyong pong kapatid ng Pangulong Junior sa ganito pong mga usapin, hindi lang po siguro para impluwensya ng isa't isa, kung hindi para lang po sa malayang diskusyon ng mga isyong pambayan?
Oo naman, nagkakadiskusyon naman kami at ang nangyari dyan, ang background kasi ni Bongbong, kung tutuusin, ekonomista yon. So nagbibilang siya sa number. Tama naman, may malaking pakinabang, sumama sa RCEP. Ako naman yung tao sa bukid, ang inaalala ko at saka yung mga mangingisda.
Tatako naman po mismo ang kalihim ngayon ay ang ating Pangulo. Sa usapin po, ma'am,
Oo nga.
yes ma'am, so sa usapin po ng pangangasiwa sa kagawaran, kasama ho kayo, di po ba doon sa nanawagan na nung una na magtalaga na po ng permanenteng kalihim sa DA?
Sa palagay ko, maganda yung idea noon ni Presidente Bongbong na siya na mismo ang magiging kalihim ng DA. Ang problema, palagay ko, yung kapatid ko mabait, hindi nagagalit. Ako nagwawala na dyan sa mga smuggler.
From the nation's capital, all sides, all the time. I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. The big story tonight.
Senator Amy Marcos wants Congress to launch a deeper probe to find out the real masterminds behind the smuggling of onions and other agricultural products in the country.
Senator Amy said this in response to a question on Radyo 5's Ted Filon and DJ Chacha about reports on social media alleging that in-laws of her brother, President Bongbong Marcos, are involved in large-scale smuggling. Senator Marcos tells Ted Filon that she was initially shocked by the allegations circulating on social media. She noted that such reports are harmful as it could spark issues within their family. And with this, Senator believes that an investigation should be launched to find out who are really responsible behind large-scale agricultural smuggling in the Philippines so that appropriate charges can be filed against them.
So ang sabi ko nga, dapat tuloy-tuloy yung investigasyon. Walang kamag-anak, walang kikilingan. Kailangan talaga alamin lahat yan. Kasi yung sira ng ekonomiya natin, lalong-lalo na yung ating mga mambubukid, talagang hindi pwede isaalang-alang sa ganitong kalakaran. I think it's most important ituloy na natin yan.
This is not the first time that the Marcos siblings seem to be at odds with each other. Just this weekend, while President Marcos joined an Ilocano festival on the eve of the EDSA anniversary, Senator Amy opted not to. Here's what we know. On Saturday, February 25, President Bongbong Marcos acknowledged the People Power anniversary. He said he was one with the nation in remembering the event. The chief executive said he is also offering a hand of reconciliation to those with, quote, different political persuasions. He even had a wreath placed at the EDSA monument. On the eve of the EDSA anniversary, Marcos Jr. joined the Tanok ni Ilocano Festival in Lawag City. However, the festival was boycotted by his sister, Amy, who noted in a statement that she could not, quote, stomach celebrations during the period which commemorates the end of the rule of their father, the late Marcos Sr. Amy said she used the time to visit their father's grave instead. But in her interview with Ted Filon's radio program, she had this to say.
May mga write-ups na lumalabas na you have a rift of some sort regarding the holiday na nagdaan and you chose not to attend yung isang festival
Event.
sa sa Ilocos dahil yung petsa daw ay hindi nyo masikmura.
Oo, tama yun, pero hindi si Bongbong yun. Sinabon ko ng bonggang-bongga ang aking anak, si Gov. Si Gov Matt. Yung aking bunso na naging governor. Hindi nag-iisip kasi bagets pa, katulad nyo. Ayan naman, ang mga millennial, wala nang paki sa EDSA. Sabi niya, what's the fuss, ma'am? Sabi ko, naku anak, hindi ako nagse-celebrate. Bahala ka sa buhay mo, hindi ko kaya.
Aside from this weekend, the Marcos siblings also had other public disagreements on specific policies. Senator Amy Marcos was among lawmakers that opposed the creation of the Maharlika Fund, which was backed by her brother. The senator expressed fears that the proposed bill might cause the country to suffer the same fate as Malaysia, which was hounded by corruption issues. And last year, in his first official act as president, Marcos Jr. vetoed a bill creating the Bulacan Eco Zone Bill, which Amy supported. Amy expressed disappointment over the veto, noting that she hopes it will not create a chilling effect on potential investors. And more recently, Senator Amy abstained on the Senate's ratification of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP, noting its potential impacts on the agricultural sector. President Bongbong Marcos, on the other hand, lauded the Senate's decision, citing the economic opportunities it will bring to the country.
Here to weigh in on these seeming disagreements between the Marcos siblings, we have with us on the show political analyst Richard Heydarian. He's joining us via Zoom. Welcome to The Big Story, Richard.
My pleasure, as always.
Hey, Richard, are we reading too much into this?
Well, for me, I know you're expecting fireworks here, no? No, for me, as far as intra-dynasty, intra-family feuds, whatever is concerned, it's not something new, is it? I mean, we remember very well nung panahon ni Pangulong Duterte, no? There was a lot of divisions on so many fronts, right? We know that, for instance, when Duterte was the vice mayor and Sara Duterte was the mayor, they were not exactly on the same page for a long time. We know that later on, when Sara Duterte was contemplating running for the presidency, it looks like President Duterte had other thoughts, or he was not 100% behind her. So this is the story of Philippine politics, dominated by families, and when the families are so dominant, rivalries are going to come up more or less between within the family members. But where this means a crisis within the family or so, no, I wouldn't go that far. The other thing we have to keep in mind is the difference in temperament. No, so Senator Amy Marcos said na yung brother niya is more economist, that she's more in touch with the grassroots, etc. I think one thing to keep in mind is really the temperament, because if you talk about Marcos Jr., I think Marcos Jr., he's really the unity man, right? I mean, we saw it. I mean, we were talking about this during elections. I don't need the unity na yan, minamak siya, but we clearly see his foreign policy positioning. We clearly see even his positioning during the EDSA commemoration. It was the most center you can get, right? Not to piss off any side. And even the phrasing that he uses is as safe as possible. While Amy Marcos generally is much more spicy, much more aggressive and passionate in her statements. And sometimes she doesn't really shy from any kind of controversy. And of course, the other thing we have to keep in mind is Marcos Jr., of course, all of them have their own political ambitions, but we know that Amy Marcos was really a big political figure nung kabataan pa lang nila, nung time pa lang ng father niya. And we know from the letters of her father, friends, my colleagues in Inquiry, like Ambet Acampo, have written about it. Amy Marcos was, dad's favorite. No, I mean, the late Marcos Sr. had a lot of respect and belief in her, and she was kind of the star child. While Bongbong Marcos was a little bit more laid back, and it was really later on that he comes into
Richard,
full political being. No,
but Richard, all of this is well and good, but it really goes beyond phrasing, hindi ba? I mean, a lot of things where they have taken really surprising positions relative to each other. EDSA, that's not just phrasing. I mean, offering a wreath at the EDSA monument, I mean, you have to give it, but the optics there is quite powerful and quite stark. And then when it comes to agriculture, real policy rift there between keeping the portfolio or telling the president, let go of that portfolio. The Bulacan Airport City from day one. RCEP, another thing. And these are really quite important programs. These are not just, differences in other minor issues.
Well, first of all, let me, I'm not going to correct per se, but to give more context, in fact, the Philippines was the last country to ratify RCEP among the member nations, from what I understand. And in fact, despite President Marcos Jr.'s public statements on endorsing RCEP, because after all, that was the very strong position of NEDA Secretary Balisacan, and it was really endorsed by the big businesses. We know one reason actually medyo na-delay itong voting, and is that, in fact, President Marcos Jr. himself had some second thoughts about this. Remember, he's the agricultural secretary. He has some serious worries about the impact of trade liberalization on the agricultural sector. So I'm sure Senator Amy Marcos cares about the grassroots and the farmers, but as the agriculture secretary, in fact, President Marcos Jr., from what I understand, also had his own kind of reservations. But at the end of the day, he's the president of the Philippines, and I think he took into consideration the more majority view of influential business groups, investors, not to mention his top technocrats like Secretary Balisacan. That's why he was quite supportive of it once the vote was finished. But we know behind the scenes it's much more complicated than that. On the issue of Senate and issues like hoarding, smuggling and all, well, ito yung forte talaga ng Senado, investigations and everything like that. It's not like President Marcos Jr. saying walang masama nangyari, di ba? And of course, as far as Amy Marcos is concerned, she wants to establish her own independence, that she has an independent thought, that she's her own, right? That she's not just another Marcos there. And of course, it also helps with their optics, right? That, even if they're from the same family, they're siblings, each of them try to fiscalize. In the case of, Amy Marcos, she's trying to fiscalize the executive, even if her brother's there. So that makes her look good, that makes the family look good. On the EDSA issue, I would also try to, not to disagree, but I would say, remember, it was Amy Marcos who kind of said, parang patawarin mo na kami, give us a second chance. Remember, she said that last year, ang tahimik doon si Marcos Jr. But now that Marcos Jr. is the president, we see him as much more conciliatory, while Amy Marcos is perhaps a little bit recalibrating on that front. So I'm not saying it's a good cop, bad cop situation, but we can see clearly both of them are recalibrating and each of them are trying to help to fully rehabilitate their family in different ways from different positions. So I'm not saying we're too much reading into it, but on certain issues, clearly the difference is not as big. Where I believe there is some difference is foreign policy, because I think President Marcos Jr. is really convinced that the Philippines has to pivot towards US, Japan, Australia. We're already talking about an alternative quad, real quad, these four allies. Well, if you look at Amy Marcos, she has consistently been much more in favor of robust relations with China and a little bit skeptical about the Philippines aligning with the West, which could potentially provoke
Richard,
China. So honestly, hindi naman siguro dahil expertise ko yan, but I think foreign policy is where I see some serious consistent disagreement.
Richard, with this public display of opposition, I wonder how it affects things on ground, particularly with the supporters. Is there disunity amongst the supporters of the Marcos family? And how is dissent being taken right now in the public sphere? If there's dissent being faced by the president from his own sister, I wonder what it feels like now for pundits, for political analysts like you who voice out. I mean, compared to the past administration to today's administration, have you seen or felt any change in tone when it comes to that?
Well, obviously, things are going to get very interesting come 2025. And as far as I understand, I mean, Marcos is gunning for another Senate, stint. And if she tops that race, then she could be even in the conversation for at least the vice presidency or the presidency. So that's something I'm watching out. So if you're Amy Marcos right now, you want to make sure that that not only one Marcos is shining, meaning the one in the Malacanang, but you want to also position yourself for potentially topping the Senate race, and who knows, anything is possible, right? The other thing I would want to mention here is that we are in a bizarre social media blogosphere situation, because I think a lot of this is where I think my prediction was not very accurate. I mean, I think on the other things, my record, but on this one, I'm actually surprised, because last year, the idea was, I mean, you would expect under Marcos Jr., you'd have a lot of bloggers, very influential bloggers with millions of followers and tens of millions of views to be fully 100% behind Marcos Jr. And that's exactly the first thing that went out of the window, right? And I'm not trying to say correlation is causation, but I see the departure of Vic Rodriguez, right? And some of the cabinet members, like former Press Secretary Trixie. Not long after that, we see this rift really coming to force. And remember, a lot of bloggers were supposed to be part of the Malacanang Press Corps or something like that, right? That went through the window once Vic Rodriguez, Trixie, and all were out. So since October last year, we're seeing a bizarre situation whereby there are not many bloggers who are supporting Marcos Jr. There are more bloggers supporting the opposition. Or exactly, that's the weird thing. That's really what I didn't see coming. Kaya I completely agree. Things can get wild. Things can get wild next year as we head into the midterm elections. Yun ang hindi ko na-expect talaga. So on that, wow, I'm still scratching my head. In fact, the joke of someone was that, Richard, ikaw lang yatang political blogger na mas fair and constructive kay Marcos Jr. So like, weird things are happening nowadays.
All right, thank you for weighing in. We have political analyst Richard Heydarian joining us tonight. And coming right up, several provinces in Luzon are found to be most at risk for sustaining infrastructure damage due to climate change. We'll get some more details from Rex Cruz, a watershed management expert, when the big story returns. Keep it here on One News. You're watching the big story here on One News.
Several provinces in the Philippines, mostly in Luzon, are at risk of damage to property from climate change. Here's what we know. A study by Sydney-based research firm Cross Dependency Initiative lists Pangasinan, Pampanga, Cagayan, Nueva Ecija, and Tarlac as areas that are highly vulnerable to climate change. The study measured the amount of damage these areas would sustain due to extreme weather conditions. Metro Manila, Bulacan, Isabela, Davao del Sur, and Leyte are also on the list. This is not, of course, the first time the country is making headlines for being hazard-prone. The Philippines has been topping global indices on disaster risk and climate change impact. But other than that, the Philippines has also spoken up about the possible implications of climate change on territorial boundaries. Speaking to the United Nations, Philippine Ambassador Ariel Peñaranda noted that rising sea levels could affect baselines by which maritime zones are measured. And on the legislative front, the lower house has started hearing a bill seeking to create a Department of Disaster Resilience. The measure will seek to improve the country's institutional capacity for disaster risk management. It also aims to give the president power to sanction negligent local government officials. Now, here to talk to us about that study, Mr. Rex Cruz. He is a watershed management expert from the University of the Philippines. Good evening. Welcome to The Big Story, sir.
Thank you very much, Roby.
Sir, of course, I mean, other than, at least from the limited list that I read out, other than Davao del Sur, all of that, I think, is in Luzon. Central Luzon mostly coming down to Metro Manila. Other than geography, what are the common denominators among these vulnerable provinces?
Actually, Robbie, what you mentioned about the geography is really a major factor. Now, let me just emphasize that because the reasons and the common factors among these provinces that you mentioned is that they are located along the typhoon path. You know, we know that. And then second, these provinces are actually located within a landscape that is so large as the Cagayan River Basin for the Cagayan province, and for Tarlac, Nueva Ecija, Pampanga, Bulacan, they're located within the large basin of Pampanga River Basin. And when you have very large, basin that capture rainwater, you expect a lot of surface runoff that will flow over land, and this is what is causing a lot of problems. Now, what makes these provinces seem like to be at greater risk? It's because of what we have in these provinces. In most of those provinces, or all of those provinces that you mentioned, we have the vast agricultural lands that we have. We have the vast rice lands and corn lands, that are easily damaged when there is typhoon, when there is floods, and this is what's actually giving us a large amount amount of yearly. And that is why these provinces appears to be on top of the list because of these factors.
Is the size of the settlements also a big factor here? I ask also because I'm sure a lot of people will know, bakit wala ang Batanes dyan? I mean, yan ang parating tinuturo sa atin sa grade school. Batanes is the most typhoon prone in this country that is most typhoon prone. Bakit po wala ang Batanes dyan? Does it have to do with the size of the settlements among all of these provinces that we mentioned as well?
Yes, that's right. Because the metric that they use, the metrics that they use for calculating the risk is, the probability of occurrence of a certain disastrous event, and the amount of exposure. That includes the size of the population, the infrastructure that you have there, the type of crops that you have there. You have rice in these provinces. Yes, you're right. It has something to do with the potential areas and people that will be affected by the disaster event.
We have seen a lot of extreme flooding in the past months, not just here in Metro Manila, but also down south in Mindanao. Is that something new for the country? And also, with all of the changes, with the sinking cities, how do we adjust then our response in terms of building infrastructure, in terms of long-term solutions?
Yeah, well, what we're seeing now actually has been happening for a long time. It's just that now, we have, we're getting more and more people affected, more and more infrastructure, getting affected because development, is going on even in areas that are not supposed to be built upon. So that's the problem. Now, what do we do from here to shield us from any additional or further damages in the future? It's actually, making sure that our planning system, is made more robust, in the sense that we take into consideration the probability of occurrence of these of these disaster events, so that we can identify which areas are not supposed to be built zone. The no-build zone is actually something that we need to really pinpoint, and then have the political will to make sure that these areas are not used for purposes that are not supposed to be there because of their exposure to
but Mr. Cruz, it's been decades and we still don't even have a land use act.
Yeah, well, that's one thing that I've been advocating also for a long time. It's time now for us to fix the way we plan for our land use and development, and without the national policy, the policy framework for that, it's going to be very difficult. Because right now, the regulation of land uses in the Philippines is very challenging to do, even at the local government unit level.
With that, do you think it's still necessary to come up with a Department of Disaster Resilience, or is it just redundancy? Is it just political will that we need at this point?
I believe so. I believe so that what we need is political will. I always say that to make us more resilient, let everybody, that includes the national government agencies, to do what they're supposed to do the right way. if for instance we are able to regulate the way people are actually building on different areas, in our landscape, we will be able to minimize our damages from disaster risk. I do believe that there will be redundancy when we create a new Department of Resilience, because there are already national government agencies in a position, to be able to implement those measures, like NDRRMC, and the Climate Change Commission, and so on. So all we need really is for these government agencies to work together,
Okay.
And make a unified action agenda to
Okay.
address this disaster risk.
Okay. Rex Cruz, maraming salamat po. And after the break, Gilas Pilipinas will finish the sixth and final window of the 2023 FIBA World Cup Asian qualifiers with a 1-1 record after falling to a hot-shooting Jordan squad. We will look into that and more when the big story returns. Keep it here on One News.
You're still watching the big story here on One News.
The city government of Makati has issued a closure order on the headquarters of Smart Communications. The order stems from the supposed failure of the telco to settle its franchise tax amounting to 3.2 billion pesos, as well as securing business permits since 2019. Now, in a statement, Smart says it is in talks with the Makati LGU over the matter. Smart adds that it has filed the appropriate cases to resolve its outstanding legal issues.
And before we go, Gilas Pilipinas unfortunately was not able to make a clean sweep of the sixth and final window of the 2023 FIBA World Cup Asian qualifiers as they fell short in their comeback versus Jordan 90-91. Jordan seemingly could not miss in the first half as they built a lead as huge as 25 points. But Gilas, led by naturalized import Justin Brownlee, who finished with 41 big points, made a furious comeback in the third and fourth quarter. Unfortunately, Scotty Thompson missed clutch free throws late in the game, as well as Bobby Ray Parks, who missed the game-winning shot in the end. Nonetheless, a valiant effort from our Gilas squad.
And that's the big story tonight. For more updates, follow News 5, the Philippine Star, and Business World Online. You may also log on to onenews.ph for more analysis. I'm Robbie Alampay.
The big story is also available via Signal Play app. Make a free account now at signalplay.com and stream One News anytime, anywhere. I'm Gretchen Ho. Stay safe, Philippines.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.